New polls show a majority of Brits would like to return to the EU. 60% believe that Brexit went badly or worse than expected. In fact, the question of whether they can take the step back could quickly become relevant again. 5 years after the Brexit referendum and 2 years after leaving the European Union, like the young men in the biblical story, Britons would like to return home. According to a new poll, 53% of Brits would be in favour of returning to the EU compared to just 47% against. For younger voters, 77% would be in favour. The future is European in Britain too, and it is becoming increasingly clear that Brexit was a nostalgic project born out of a sense of British specificity with no basis in reality. Boris Johnson said Brexit was an opportunity to rediscover the dynamism of the bearded Victorians. First Brexit Secretary David Davis said, "Our story is one of trade and privateering, back to Drake and beyond," and he wanted to incorporate that into European empire. Dominic Raab, Davis' successor as Brexit Minister, now Deputy Prime Minister, called on the British to resume their historic role as privateer-free traders, so pirates like Drake. But let's not be too specific. The point is, men in tights on sailing ships are not the stuff of which future visions are woven. In hard reality, according to UK Chamber of Commerce survey of 1,100 exporting firms, 71% believe Brexit has made them less competitive. British truck drivers have to deal with bureaucracy and waiting times. British exporters are losing their shares in the European market. For Germany, the Czech Republic is now almost as important as trading partner as Great Britain, which for its part is becoming increasingly dependent on imports from China. And this is called taking back control. 60% of Britons now believe that Brexit went badly or worse than expected, as I said. No wonder they were promised Pirates of the Caribbean as a future. Well, in the Gospel of Luke, the Father welcomes the repentant Son. It's not time yet, but it could be there sooner than some think. As member of the House of Lords, Andrew Adonis tweeted these days, "If Boris goes, so does Brexit." When dealing with historical figures or controversial topics, fact-based information should be given and a wide range of positions should be conveyed according to the new directive published by the Ministry of Education on Thursday. The history of the British Empire or the Middle East conflict should be discussed in a balanced way. The government cites the issue of racism as an example of what this means for teaching staff in concrete terms. Teachers should make it clear that racism has no place in our society, they wrote. But when it comes to movements like Black Lives Matter, it must be shown that they are pursuing party political goals that go beyond the common consensus, such as theses on what resources the police should receive. The new directive is part of a series of measures and statements launched by the Conservative British government in a campaign unofficially dubbed the War on Woke. BBC education correspondent Brenwan Jeffries commented that the new directive was a clear intervention by the government, as schools have always been independent. This is the era of the so-called culture war, in which polarized positions are exchanged in bitter clashes on social media, she wrote. However, it is doubtful whether the new directive will calm or further heat up. A case at a primary school in Nottingham recently caused displeasure in the ruling party, in which school children were supposed to write letters critical of Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his alleged transgressions in the so-called Partygate affair. The Scotland Yard Police Department can't get out of the negative headlines. Almost a year after the murder of 33-year-old Londoner Sarah Everard by a police officer, 3 of the perpetrator's former colleagues have been charged with grossly offensive WhatsApp messages. As the British public prosecutor announced on Thursday, there were 2 active police officers and another who has since left the service. The charges follow an investigation by an independent agency into police operations. As a result, the police officers are said to have exchanged misogynist and racist messages with Everard's now convicted killer, Wayne Couzens. The accused are due to appear in court in March. The London police have come under enormous criticism in recent years, among other things, because police officers sent messages with discriminatory content or acted harshly against demonstrators. A low point was the murder of Everard by police officer Cousins, which caused horror across the country. And more recently, Police Chief Cressida Dick, who has come under severe pressure, announced her resignation after losing the trust of London Mayor Sadiq Khan. He no longer trusted her to initiate the necessary cultural change in the Metropolitan Police. The successor to the important post is still open. Stormy weather in parts of Great Britain and Ireland also led to delays in train services and power outages on Thursday night. In Scotland and England, numerous train connections were cancelled due to fallen trees on the tracks, damage to overhead lines or the signalling systems. Thousands of homes in the north of England were temporarily cut off from electricity. Dudley, as the storm is called in Great Britain, brought wind speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. And on Thursday, we here in Germany were hit hard quite as well. My house was quite shaking because of the windows. The first hydrogen-powered garbage truck in Great Britain will be on the road in Aberdeen from the beginning of March, powered by green hydrogen. It can empty conventional rubbish bins as well as pick up recycling and bulk bins. The chassis comes from Hyzon Motors, the body from Giesing Norba, one of the largest European suppliers of refuse collection vehicles and presses. The waste collection vehicle for the North East Scottish metropolis was funded under the Interreg Northwest Europe programme as part of the Hector project. That's the hydrogen waste collection vehicles in Northwest Europe. It is part of a growing H2 fleet of currently 85 hydrogen-powered commercial vehicles, including hydrogen-powered buses and other municipal vehicles. It should therefore not only save CO2 compared to the diesel units used to date, but also collect data that will support the operation of hydrogen-powered garbage collectors in the future. Even after the end of the project in June 2023, the participating vehicles should remain in operation. Aberdeen's fuel cell waste collection vehicle is one of 7 being deployed at 7 pilot sites in Northwest Europe, including Arnhem and Groningen in the Netherlands, Duisburg and Herten in Germany, Touraine-Vallée-de-Leundre in France, and Brussels in Belgium. Each vehicle is tested in different environments, from rural areas to city centres. The use of the H2 garbage truck is another building block in Aberdeen's hydrogen concept, which started last year with the procurement of 15 fuel cell double-deckers from Wrightbus. The British government and security authorities share the assessment of the USA that, contrary to what Moscow had announced, no withdrawal of Russian troops from the border with Ukraine has taken place. There is currently no evidence that the Russians are withdrawing from the border regions with Ukraine, British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss wrote in a guest article in The Telegraph on Thursday, warning that the crisis could drag on for weeks or even months. Truss was due to arrive in Kiev on Thursday for a visit, and she did that. Later in the week, she wanted to travel to Warsaw and to the security conference in Munich. The US government made it clear on Wednesday evening that it classifies the partial withdrawal of Russian troops announced by Moscow to ease the Ukraine conflict as misinformation. In the past few days, Russia has brought about 7,000 additional troops near the Ukrainian border, and some of them just arrived, a senior White House official said. A British MP has warned that public money could be used in the settlement over abuse allegations against Prince Andrew. As it became known on Tuesday, and you heard about it on my channel already, Queen Elizabeth II's eldest son had agreed to a comparison, it's not comparison, but I'm liking the word, with the American in Virginia Jeffries lawsuit in New York. Andrew has reportedly committed to paying up to £12 million. There is a risk that this will be at the expense of the public, Labour MP Andy MacDonald told the BBC on Wednesday night, and he said, "We need to know exactly where the money is coming from." MacDonald said he would raise the issue in Parliament next week. Plaintiff Virginia Jeffrey accuses Andrew of repeatedly abusing her when she was a minor. She claims to have been a victim of an abuse ring set up by US multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein and his ex-partner Ghislaine Maxwell. According to her own statements, she was mediated to the royal for abuse, and Andrew denies the allegations. The 61-year-old prince initially announced that he would face a jury trial. An interrogation by Joffrey's lawyer was scheduled for March 10th. The trial threatened to overshadow the Queen's 70th Jubilee this year. It is therefore assumed that Andrew had to bow to pressure from the royal family. It is speculated that the 95-year-old monarch could help her son with a private fortune. But the distinction between private and public property is not always easy for the head of state. The British consumer goods group Reckitt Benckiser intends to become more profitable again in the current year, despite persistently high raw material prices. The margin measured by operating profit should be above the 2021 level, the manufacturer of brands such as Calgon, Clearasil, Sagrotan and Vanish announced on Thursday in London. Last year, the operating profit fell even more than sales, partly because of the increased prices when purchasing products. The margin in the core business fell accordingly by 1.6 percentage points to 22.9%. The share price rose by more than 3% in the morning, and that's because sales in the area that remain in the group after sales fell by around 2% to almost 13 billion British pounds. This was partly due to the strong pound. The organic growth was eaten up by a translation, or what you call it, with the currency effects. On a comparable basis, the increase was 3.5%. Reckitt Benckiser is aiming for a value of between 1 and 4% in 2022. Operating profit fell 8.5% to 2.9 billion pounds. The baby food business in China is no longer included in the figures. The group is currently selling this to a Chinese investor. Reckitt Benckiser is under construction. For example, CEO Laxman Narasimhan, who has been in office since September 2019, has cleaned up the mistakes made by his predecessor Rakesh Kapoor. According to information from the Bloomberg news agency, the entire baby food division could be split off. Should that happen, Narasimhan would reverse its 17 billion acquisition of Mead Johnson Nutrition in 2017. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.